Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 48.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to bringing you useful information on custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques to take your game to new heights. Today is Leap Day, so happy Leap Day. Actually, today I thought I would be saying an actual goodbye to Glenn Coombe, the putting doctor, who had announced that he was going to leap away today onto his boat into retirement. But Glenn is actually going to spend about another 10 days. He's got, before he actually finally retires, installing 2 more putting perfection platforms with Rob Gibb. So by the time that I do the next podcast, I believe Glenn will really be retired, sitting on his boat, enjoying the good life. Glenn, thanks again for all the things you've done for your great friendship and for sharing a lot of your knowledge with me. I know you're going to enjoy this podcast today with Stephen Yellin, who helps golfers and actually performers access what he calls the fluid motion factor. And when I took the class, this 3-hour class at the PGA show, what really struck me is this is a way to help people access their potential. Maybe not every time you play golf, but to set up the conditions that allow you to do this. Well, I've thought a little bit about this over the last couple of weeks after doing the class, and I can vividly recall 2 instances where I'm sure that somehow I set up the conditions to do this in my life. One of them was when I played basketball at Carnegie Mellon University. I actually played JV basketball. Well, I played all 4 years, but the night before a game that I played, it was with the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, I remember having a dream that I was going to steal the ball near the end of the game. I was going to drive down the court, make a layup, and that was going to be the game-winning shot. Well, with about a minute to go before the end of the game, I stole the ball. I started driving down the court, and time stood still, and time slowed down. And I can remember almost watching myself drive down the court to shoot that layup. Never forget it. It's totally vivid. It's like it happened yesterday. The second instance was actually in golf. About roughly 15 years ago, they still had a thing called the Oldsmobile Scramble, and we had a team that made the state qualifiers. Well, we got to the last hole. In the Oldsmobile Scramble, everybody had to hit 2 drives. There were 5 of us. One of the pros at our club also played. And I hadn't hit my second drive. We got to the 18th hole. I was the only person that was going to drive the ball. And it was just this morning that I think I remember that I understand what was the cue for what happened here. What I remember is one of the golfers in our group drove down into the left rough, and I know what he was doing was, in case I didn't hit a great shot, he wanted to be sure he could find it. I think that was the cue for what I did, because I do not remember walking up to the tee. I don't remember any kind of pre-shot routine. All I remember was the final result, and that was I hit a drive, and I don't think I'm exaggerating. I hit it 280 yards straight down the middle. We birdied the hole. We went to the national championships as a result of what we did the whole day. But that shot, and although I don't, like I said, I don't remember what happened as I was setting up to it. I think I was accessing what Stephen calls in this podcast interview the fluid motion factor. So enjoy this today. I know you will. Hello, this is Tony Wright with the Golf Improvement Podcast. I'm really delighted today to get and have you hear from, to get to speak with and have you hear from Stephen Yellin, who teaches his Fluid Motion Factor program at the David Ledbetter Academy in Florida. I got to spend about 3 hours with Stephen and also with Rick McCord at the Rick McCord Academy when I was at the PGA show. He gave us, a group of about 12 people, just kind of a really good touch of what his fluid motion program is, and it's pretty amazing. So I'm really tickled that he will spend a little time talking about some elements of that today, and maybe a little different than sometimes, because when I heard his presentation at the PGA show, he talked a little bit about practice, and there were some things there that I thought were real interesting. So, Stephen, thanks again. Welcome today.
Thank you very much, Tony, and thank you for having me.
Well, you bet. Well, if you wouldn't mind, please, and gosh, how many times have you told your story in 38 years, right? But
I've told it a few times.
Yeah, right. It's always good for people to put things in that kind of perspective. So would you please do that? Talk about your story, how you kind of got started in this world.
Surely. My background is actually in tennis, not in golf. I grew up in the great state of Florida, and when I was a senior in high school, I had the good fortune to win the Florida State Singles High School Championship, be a member of the championship team. Went on to have a good career playing tennis at the University of Pennsylvania. And then when I was a senior at Penn, I had this extraordinary zone experience. It was unlike anything that I've ever experienced before. And, I was sort of in the middle of the food chain of national junior tennis and national collegiate tennis. I'd go to the NCAAs, I'd win a round or two, but, then someone would have Stephen Yellin for breakfast. But for the first time, I experienced what these top players feel when they play, and the overriding experience was freedom. It's just absolute freedom. So I walked off the court, and I realized I had to figure out why. Why did this happen to me? So I was on it for 2 or 3 days, 24/7, and finally I realized why I had that experience. It was very clear to me. There was no gray area. I experienced this particular thing, and because of that, my game went to another level. So I thought it would take a few years to figure out a systematic program to at least give someone a chance to be moving in that direction of accessing these zone experiences. And of course, I was only thinking about tennis at the time.
Yeah.
But it took a couple more years than 2 or 3 years. It actually took a lifetime. And the reason why it took so long is that when someone does play well, they're not too sure what's going on. So it's a very, very subtle arena to understand what precipitates zone experiences, and then construct a program that will allow someone to have an opportunity to have those kinds of experiences.
Well, that was one of the things that was exciting about taking the class from you, because you put things in a context. It's not, oh, you're going to be this way all the time if you do this, but you gave us a little bit of an understanding about, this might, you have the chance to get there if you do this, but you can evaluate where you are and find out maybe why you weren't there. So I can see where it would take a good bit of time to get all those pieces in place, right?
Yeah, and Tony, you were exposed to the program. You saw how simple it was, right?
Yeah.
And it took a long, long time to distill everything down to that simplicity. And, it has to be simple because when someone does play well, it feels very simple. So you're never going to get simplicity from complexity. You're only going to get simplicity from simplicity.
Yeah.
So the program is quite simple.
What's also fascinating since I've been back is, I've asked a couple of people, when I think whenever you ask somebody, when have you had an experience like this, their eyes almost like, they light up, right?
Right.
And
right.
and it's like they almost in a way go into a zone just describing it, right?
Yes. It's not only a unique sports experience, Tony. It's a unique life experience because sports, especially sports, is all about boundaries. And in golf, there's probably as much boundaries as there is in any other sport, because you really only get one chance. It's not like tennis or basketball or baseball or football, where you can be really, really down and come back and get many chances. In golf, 2 or 3 swings and that's it. The round is over. So I think people feel the boundaries more in golf than any other sport. And when you're able to have an experience of being in an environment where there are very strict boundaries and you are not a prisoner of those boundaries, you are free. You are free. That really relates to how you want to live your life, because we have boundaries in life. And those people who have taken everything to another level in their lives as far as being successful, part of that is that they don't feel the boundaries. They have the freedom to do what they want to do and how they think and how they operate. So it's a very unique life experience when you have a zone experience.
Yeah. Well, you've touched a little bit on some of these parts of this next question, but maybe a little more detail on some of the things golfers do experience when they've experienced what you call the fluid motion factor.
Well, there's basically 3 experiences that someone has when they're in the zone, and see if you listeners out there can relate. The first is that time slows down. It just feels like everything is moving in slow motion. Everyone knows who's played golf knows that feeling when they're at the top of the swing, and it almost feels like, time is just sort of frozen. They have all frozen in a good way. They have all the time in the world.
Yeah.
The second thing that most people experience when they're in the zone is they're not thinking. The intellect shuts down, and this is such a contrasting experience with what most players have when they play golf. They're just going through their checklist. Well, all of a sudden the checklist disappears and everything is checked off automatically without micromanaging. So the mind becomes very quiet. And then the third experience is that the motion becomes very effortless and smooth. It just doesn't feel like there's any extra anything going on, especially mentally. And of course, that translates into a smoother, more efficient motion.
See what happens when you're real busy? I love this. Almost everybody I talk to, Stephen, somebody interrupts them with the phone thing during the time, but that's because they got a lot going on, right?
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. That's great. Well, if you would, and this was a lot of what we did in the class, talk about some of the things that golfers are doing when they're creating the fluid motion factor, but, maybe just as importantly, some of the things that they think they're doing when they create it, but they're not. Do you know what I'm saying? That, in a way, almost where they might try too hard,
right,
and do things that just, that go against what they're attempting to do, right?
Right. Well, there's one question that every golfer and every coach should be able to answer. And it's the most fundamental question they can ask themselves. And if they can't answer this question, then they will be searching and hunting every week, which most golfers do, looking for, okay, what's going to work this week or what's going to work this round. And the question is very simple. How is fluid motion produced, and why does it break down?
Yeah.
Now, unless someone can answer that question, which is the most fundamental question you can ask, because when someone is playing well, you can see the fluidity. Fluidity just means the swing is being synced correctly through the different parts of the swing. Now, everyone's brain physiology operates identically. In other words, in order to produce fluid motion in golf, you have to have the same processes, experience the same processes that a baseball player has to experience when he produces fluid motion when he's pitching or when he's hitting, or a soccer player or a hockey player or whatever. And one of the main characteristics, if not the main characteristics, of producing fluid motion is that the mind loves wholeness. Wholeness. Wholeness is not the absence of desires or the absence of things to think about. What it is, it's the integration and seamless integration of the togetherness of all of the different parts. For instance, if someone's behind a ball, they take into consideration all the different elements of the shot. They take into consideration the lie, the wind, where they are in the round, what kind of shot they want to hit, how aggressive, and they construct what I call an algorithm, which contains all the parts. Now, if something starts pulsating outside of that algorithm, don't hit it left, don't hit it right, don't hit it long, don't hit it short, right before they're about to pull the trigger, or during the actual motion, then wholeness is broken because something is dominating, something is becoming more important than everything else. And as soon as wholeness is broken, you are at a place you don't want to be. And where is that place? You're at the blackjack table at the Bellagio.
I love that analogy. Yeah, right.
You're sitting with 14. You may get a 7, but chances are you're going to get a face card. You don't know because the connection between the mind and the body has shut down. Or I shouldn't say it's shut down. It's been tremendously weakened. So you're really not in control of your destiny. So golf instruction, for the most part, is taught systematically how to break wholeness. Okay, I want you to get the club in this position. I want you to do this. Or the student, the player is telling themselves this because they can't answer that fundamental question. So this is essentially the main reason why most golfers don't really get better. And if anything, they get a little worse because systematically they're going against setting up the conditions that the brain has to experience in order to produce fluid motion.
So, and you talked in the, and we went through different cues, but what was fun, and you have a variety of cues that you teach in terms of helping them to achieve fluid motion, but then you can almost fight it too much, right? Or you can think that you're using these cues, and that in itself kind of creates, and as you call, breaks wholeness, right? Which I thought was real fascinating as we went through the class.
Well, here's the analogy, okay? You know that third grade teacher you had that always knew whether you were telling the truth or not telling the truth, okay? Like, you spill something on Sally, on purpose, and the teacher asks you, "Now, Stephen, did you spill something on Sally?" "No, I teach." "Oh," and the teacher looks at you and, okay, that's it. I'm out. She got me, right? Well, the physiology of the mind and the body does the same thing. It will tell you whether you're faking it or not. It will give you a direct response as to whether you really experienced wholeness or you didn't. The body's feedback during the swing, you'll feel it. The swing did not feel synced. So there's instant feedback on this. And this part of the brain that produces fluid motion, accessing this arena of the brain that produces fluid motion, it's very subtle. It's extremely subtle. Because if it wasn't, Tony, you would have read about it in Golf Magazine or Golf Digest, and you would be doing it all the time. But that is so far from the truth. So the body is that the body is that third grade teacher. You're going to get the feedback, and if you don't do as you said, these fluid cues the way they're supposed to be done, you will know about it immediately during the swing. So yes, it's very subtle.
Yeah. Well, I got to we're going to change topics a little bit, but I'm really interested to hear you talk more about this. I didn't get to see your main stage presentation at the show because I had another appointment, but I watched it afterwards, and I got fascinated when you were talking about practicing and how people do practice and how maybe they should practice. So this is sort of a two-part question. You talked a little bit when we were in the class about putting and what you call DNA goals, okay, and how people often get into that, but maybe both of those things. Talk a little bit about the world of putting and maybe DNA goals, and then also what you talked about in your talk about practice and abstraction and how to measure. I mean, it's a big question I'm giving you here, right? We've got about 5 or 10 minutes almost. How you how you might want to do a little better when you're practicing and maybe practicing your short game, for example.
Well, let's start with we can start with the short game. So the way that people practice is with a report card mentality. What do I mean? Okay. Let's say you're putting, and essentially you're giving yourself a grade on every putt. Oh, I made the putt. Oh, I missed the putt. Oh, it lipped out. Oh, it was close. Oh, it was not close. So you're using very concrete criteria. And when you use concrete criteria, very black and white criteria, essentially all you're doing is you're just culturing the mind to be concrete. You're just culturing the mind to be concrete, sort of on the surface level. Then, when you go into a regular round of golf, the only way you can putt well is if the mind is abstract. Wholeness, abstraction, it's the same thing. But yet you've been practicing all week with this report card mentality. So it's like you're wearing a red shirt, and then you tee it up, all of a sudden you have to wear a white shirt. Well, what's that all about? It makes no sense at all. It makes no sense because you haven't been able to answer the question. How is fluid motion produced and why does it break down? And that's what you want to experience when you play a competitive round. But yet you're practicing going absolutely the opposite way. You're practicing culturing the mind to be in a situation internally where it weakens the relationship between the mind and the body. What you should be practicing is culturing the mind to be abstract, is culturing the mind to experience wholeness when you putt. And I have a way of doing this, these levels of abstraction, where you're using abstract criteria versus, we didn't really get into levels of abstraction.
I did buy the book you talked about, though.
Okay,
I'm looking forward to reading it. It's a little bit different for somebody like me, but it's going to be fun.
Right.
Yeah.
So you should be practicing setting up the conditions that the mind is empowered with, not weakened with. Because then what you're doing is you're used to being in that space so that when you do tee it up and it means something, you have access to that, or you have freer access than if you're just practicing concrete criteria and culturing the mind to be concrete the whole week.
So instead of just, I've got to make all these putts when I do it, when I'm practicing, or I got to make 100 in a row or whatever.
This is in my mind, okay, not the most efficient use of your time in practice. It's just not. Because what difference does it make if you make 100 putts in a row? Of course, it makes some difference, okay, you have a little confidence.
Sure.
But if your mind goes concrete when you're putting and you shut down accessing the fluid motion factor, it doesn't matter what you did the whole week. The brain physiology doesn't care that you made 1,000 putts. You better access the correct processes in the mind that allow the hands and the shoulders and the whole body to be soft.
I know you're very busy. You may have not listened to the last podcast, but I did it with Rob Gibb, who's one of the senior Sam Putt Lab instructors, and he had talked with Brad Faxon and said Brad Faxon's last thought when he's about to putt is to be as non-caring about the results as possible.
That's
which
exactly
I just
correct.
blew me away.
Well, here's the thing. The reason why putters are great putters is there's a very specific experience that they have. They access the fluid motion factor. The fluid motion factor it's not my process. It's nature's process. It's everybody's process. And the only way you can access that, the only way, is if the mind becomes quieter. If the mind experiences deeper levels of wholeness or abstraction. And the quickest way to shut that down is to say, okay, at all costs, I'm going to make this putt. Even though, of course, you want to make it, but that's the quickest way to shut it down. Boom. Then all of a sudden, you're just a mediocre putter.
And you may make it, but you're doing your rolling the dice thing again, right?
It's Vegas, baby. It is Vegas.
Yeah. Well, I forgot to include this in the pre-ideas of questions, but I'm sure you can answer it. When we did the class, you also integrated Focus Band a little bit into it, and I know you're very high on it. I'm curious, a little more comments on that, and how you're using it as you're teaching fluid motion factor.
The Focus Band, in my opinion, is the most brilliant device ever introduced into sports, whether it's golf or any other sport. Because what it measures and what it gives instant real-time feedback is just how much wholeness you had in the brain. What could be better than that? So what it does, it measures your EEG, your brain waves, electroencephalographic waves. And it measures two waves of EEG in your brain. One is beta waves, which are responsible for when you're thinking a lot and analyzing a lot. In other words, you're breaking wholeness because you have to break wholeness to think like this. And the other is alpha waves, which are associated with zone experiences when the mind is very quiet. So you put this device on your forehead, and you download an app on a mobile device, and you have an avatar on your cell phone, and you're looking at it, and it gives you instant feedback whether you're generating beta waves or you're generating alpha waves. So it's able to culture the brain physiology to get used to that space so that you're not denied entry, so to speak, as sometimes you are when you're in a pressure situation or when you play a round of golf.
It's pretty slick. My experiences with it so far have been that way too. So
yeah, it's pretty slick. That's a good.
It's amazing.
It's a good description.
Of course, it's another one of these things, right? I mean, they've been working on it for 6 or 7 years, and then it becomes a success, right? But it took them a long time to get it worked out.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. It took them a long time, no question.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you've got many, many success stories with people that you've worked with that you could talk about. But if you don't mind, just a couple in terms of, working with golfers. Obviously, you could go back to the one with Buddy in baseball, but that's a little bit different. But a few golfer success stories you might share with us today.
Well, 2 months ago, I worked with a girl on the Danish national team. I'm working with the Danish national women's team this year. I'm going to go to Copenhagen and finish up working with them in April. But this is a girl by the name of Daisy Nielsen, who's a very talented golfer, 21 years old, had full status on the European Tour, but was about to lose her card and go back to Q school because she was just trying too hard. Essentially, she was too concrete. Okay, she wasn't abstract enough when she played, so she couldn't. There was a big contrast between how she practiced and how she played, like most golfers. So she comes and sees me, spends 2 days with me. We use the Focus Band on the second day when I teach, and she just loved it. Okay, she just loved it, and she wanted to buy one. So I sold her one. She loved the program. She goes to Morocco, where the final stage of Q school is for the Ladies European Tour, and she proceeds to shoot 20 under and come in second. Another girl I worked with who goes to University of Arkansas, Gabby Lopez.
Yeah, I know that.
Was in the final stage of Q school, the week of the final stage of Q school, and I get a hold of the Focus Band, and I knew that this would have an impact. And also, my program has gone through so many iterations, and it went to another iteration. It's finally done. I finally closed the book on it, and I thought this iteration, along with the Focus Band, Gabby should experience this right away. So I called her, texted her. I said, Gabby, you should come and see me right away. So she comes and sees me on Monday of the week of Q school. Q school starts Wednesday. She comes and sees me on Monday. She loves the new iteration of the program. It really has to do with these levels of abstraction. She loves the Focus Band. She has it FedEx to Daytona Beach, where they play, the next day, and then she proceeds to come in 10th and get full status on the LPGA Tour. And she made first two tournaments, she made the cut, And yesterday, she shot 2 under to, I think, be in the top 20 of the first round of the Australian LPGA tournament down under.
It's exciting stuff. It's got to be fun.
Oh, a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Amazing.
A lot of fun.
And I know that's just a sampling, but well, this has been great today. I always like to give people kind of the final word, and so let's do that. What are a few things you want to say to golfers at the end? I'd love for everybody to come see you, but maybe just a couple of thoughts for them before they come see you. How about that?
Well, here's the thought of the day. Start chilling. Just start chilling. Muscle memory doesn't break down. If you're pretty consistent on the range, that's not going to break down when you get to the course. What breaks down is your ability to access it. And the quickest way to break down your ability to access it is to have more focus, more concentration, and more determination. You'll go south in a nanosecond. So know the money is in the bank. Muscle memory is like money in the bank. It's your money. You put it in there. Start doing less and less. Start simplifying. Not only will you start playing better, but you'll start enjoying the game more.
I think that's a perfect ending. Thanks. Well, Stephen, I'm going to put some links in the show notes, both to how to reach you at the Ledbetter Academy, also to your 2 books that are both very good reading. And you have for people who may not be able to get to Florida, you have an online program people can take.
I do.
I know somebody that's about to start that. Me. Because I'm fascinated by it, and so I'll have links to all of that in the show notes. But I truly appreciate you taking the time from your busy schedule to talk with me, and it's exciting stuff to try to find ways to help golfers, everybody, do a little better and enjoy things more, right?
Exactly. Thanks for having me on, Tony. I really appreciate it.
All right.
Taking your game to new heights. www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Well, Stephen, thanks for taking the time to do this great interview with me. For those of you who want to learn more, I've provided a number of things in the show notes. I provided a link to a 1-hour presentation Stephen did at the PGA Equipment Show this year. And there's also a link to his website where you can learn more about the fluid motion factor and how you can learn more about it. And he also has written 2 books that I think are worthwhile reading for those of you who want to dive in a little deeper. Well, that's it for today. In 2 weeks, you'll hear from Jerry Lovell, the assistant to the director of club fitting at the PGA Teaching and Learning Center in Port Lucie, Florida, and an AGCP master club fitter. Jerry will talk about custom club fitting, including discussing his journey to becoming a master club fitter. I know you're going to enjoy this. See you in 2 weeks.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com.